Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. I am Lisa Jones Harwell, your host of Journeys with Jones Harwell. This morning, I am so excited, so honored that we have retired criminal defense attorney Maria Fiorentino with us today. Maria, thank you for joining us so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to today.
Yes, we have been talking about this for a while and a lot we've got going on today. But before we get started with our conversation, just provide our audience with a little bit of your background.
Okay, I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., did all my schooling there, undergrad at American University in criminal justice. Then I went to law school at Howard University School of Law. And I started working for various attorneys doing this and that. And I did some immigration, which blah, I hated. You know, it just wasn't my thing. It's criminal law. And I just ended up always going out on my own. And I just learned how to do it by sitting in the courtroom and watching other attorneys and I just took on little district court cases, driving on a suspended license, DUI cases, small little things like that that weren't too complicated. And in between all of that, my parents got older. I had to help my mother care for my father. I had my children also. And so I was always in and out of my own practice. But then at one point, I worked for an elderly attorney in Rockville, and I did a number of quorum nobis cases, which are like post conviction. And that's what, after I left his employ, I just opened up my own practice again and did post conviction cases. And the post conviction cases, they're basically a civil type of case, but they come out of a criminal case. And all my clients were inmates, most of them at least 50-year sentences or life. Most of
Mm,
them were. And basically, a post conviction case says there was ineffective assistance of counsel at the trial level, also on the appellate level. And there was prosecutorial misconduct, such as maybe not turning over exculpatory evidence to the defense. And so you're saying, hey, a lot was wrong here, and now I want my sentence either overturned or my sentence reduced. Those cases are very, very difficult to win. And I also did appeals from those cases, and the appeals are not automatic like an appeal from your trial. You have
mm,
the right to appeal within 30 days and you get the
mm-hmm,
appeal. But
mm-hmm.
an appeal from a post conviction, it has to be accepted by the court. And I only had a few accepted. And right before I retired, I won one. So I was really happy about that. And so I ended it on with a bang. And I
With the bang.
retired, yeah, at the end of 2020. But all along, through all my experiences dealing with the criminal justice system,
Mm-hmm,
dealing with defense and the prosecution and the courts, and then dealing with inmates in the prison system, and also dealt with parole because I had a number of my clients. One got out on parole through the approval of Governor Hogan
mm-hmm.
before the law was changed, which was very recently, that now the governor has been taken out of parole decisions. And I have a number of clients out on parole. So I have experience with the parole board also. And I advocated for a number of clients for parole and going to them now. Attorneys can't go before the parole commission. However, we can ask for a meeting with a commissioner to advocate for our client. So,
Okay.
and that's part of my reform here. And so I finally decided something through my undergraduate, which was back in, let me see, I graduated in 76, bicentennial year. And they were talking about criminal justice reform then. and everything that was wrong with the criminal justice system. And finally, that last year of my practice, I realized that I really wasn't doing my clients any good. I wasn't winning cases. And even if I did win them, it doesn't change the system. There is so much wrong with the system. So I decided I need to write a book. I just need to put my thoughts on paper. Now, I'm not an expert at this. I don't know budgetary issues and, financial
Right.
issues and all, but I've read a number of books on criminal justice reform.
Hmm.
And I wrote my book, and it's called Interdependency: How to Reform the Criminal Justice System. And there's my book, A View from a
Yes,
Criminal
that's how
Justice
we met.
System. Right. That's how we met. And the reason why I entitled it Interdependency is that today so much talk is said about reforming the police, defunding the police. Well, number one, yes, we need to reform the police, but it's not, the police isn't the only part of the criminal justice system. You also
Right.
have the bail. And when you look at my book, you can see how all my chapters, my first chapter, of course, is
Hmm.
an introduction. Then the second chapter is on police reform.
Hmm.
Then the next chapter is on bail reform. Then the next chapter is on sentence reform. Then the next chapter is on prison reform. Next chapter is on parole reform. Then I did a chapter on corruption, oversight, and racism. And then a last chapter on my final thoughts.
And let
And
me interrupt you here for a second, and let's talk about this, because one of the reasons why that you were so insistent on talking about this, particularly at this time, because you wanted to tie it into everything that had been happening the last couple of years with Black Lives Matter, and with George Floyd, and with Congress presenting, or the Senate, presenting a federal policing bill, which unfortunately
they
did not pass.
went kalabooey. Yeah, that's what kalabooey. It just, I just, it's so sad. But I think the whole purpose of my book, and it's a very thin book, as you can tell,
Hmm.
but it doesn't take rocket science to reform the system. What it takes, in my opinion, are two things: compassion and common sense.
Hmm.
And the title of interdependency, well, what does that have to do? What does that word have to do with the criminal justice system?
Yes.
What it has to do with, as I said, it seems like all they're talking about is police reform, but you've got bail that needs to be reformed. You've got, and I have advocated for a number of reformations that can be maybe a bit radical, but I think it's time now to start thinking outside of the box, because
Hmm.
we keep doing the same thing, and expect different results. So it's time to start thinking a little differently, because then maybe it will get us into a new direction of things that are even better than what we have now. So interdependency means that all the parts of the criminal justice system, the police, the bail, the sentencing, the courts,
Hmm.
the prisons, and the parole, they all have to be reformed together so they work together. So as the offender goes through the police is tied in with the bail. The bail is tied in with the sentencing. The
Hmm.
sentencing is tied in with the prisons, and the prisons are tied in with parole. Now,
Hmm.
here's an example: a person is in prison, and then they get out on parole. And what happens? They're stalked by the parole system, like they're waiting, to pounce on the poor person,
Yes.
waiting for them to violate a rule which is not a criminal act. just a rule. And many of them express a fear to me. Well, Maria, I'm afraid to violate anything because then I'm going to be going back to prison and
Mm-hmm.
serving out the rest of my term. So the thing is, they talk about, well, we have to rehabilitate the offender. The rehabilitation shouldn't continue in parole. He should already be rehabilitated.
Mm-hmm.
And when you read my book, and rehabilitation, I don't even think we should use that word anymore, because that word goes back to or to me, I think that you're putting the person back to the situation he was in prior to being arrested. That's not a good place to be. We
Yes.
want to put that person into a better situation so that when he
Opportunity.
gets out
Mm-hmm.
of prison, he's ready to live a productive life, a successful life, a law abiding life. And this is a life that we all want to live. We all want to strive for that healthy, happy, successful life, productive, safe,
Mm-hmm.
life. We
Mm-hmm.
all want that. Why would we want to be criminals? It just, to me, that doesn't make sense. But in one of my chapters, when I also talked about community reformation,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
reforming communities in these high crime rate areas, you need to reform those so the people have the same opportunities that other people have in other middle class neighborhoods and more affluent neighborhoods. And those high crime rate areas, all these people know is their father is in prison, their brother was shot and killed because of a bad drug deal. They've got prostitution going on one corner, drug deals going on the other, and that's all they know. So how can you build up the community? Well, it starts with the police. It has to start with them, because that's the first encounter that a person has with the criminal justice system is the police.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember as I was growing up, and I grew up in DC in a pretty much, it was a like residential and parts of it was commercial area. It was a middle class neighborhood, and we had police officers that my father had. He was a cobbler, a shoe cobbler, and Italian from Italy, and a lot of the police officers would come in to the shop
Mm-hmm.
and talk to my father. Same with the other shop on the other corner. It was a mom and pop grocery store, and the officers would come in, and we would know each other by first name. And there was I don't know, maybe a bonding with the community. And
And I think a lot of it had to more so do, as you were saying at that time too, because I can even remember it in my early youth, um, because I'm about a decade, less than a decade younger than you are, but I can remember them coming through, and they were beat cops. That's what they did. They
yeah,
knew their neighborhoods, they knew their
that's
community, and as we
that's
continue to grow, it went from being beat cops to in a car. And you
that's
can't know your community if you're
you
always driving around in a car.
That's right. That's right. And so if you read my chapter on police reform, I believe that the actual police officer who we hire
Mhm.
has to be of a very strict criteria, and they have to have not only the education, the college education, but the desire to help these communities that they're put in to. And now you have, if I go into a black community, high crime rate area, they don't want to have anything to do with the police, because the police are ready to arrest them at the slightest provocation. But we need to change that, because I remember in my husband's town up in New Jersey, they would have a youth center, which was near the high school. And that
Mhm.
youth center was, going part time during the school year and then full time during the summer. And the police were involved, and they would, certain police officers would have a certain time where they would spend with the kids there, whether
Mhm.
they're playing baseball or whatever, but getting involved with the community and fostering the trust. And that's what's lost here. We need
Yes,
to
yes.
foster the
And when
trust.
they talked about, and I think one of the things that is a hot button for people, and we've talked about this before, is when they say defunding the police.
Oh,
We're not meaning defund the police. We're meaning reallocate funds to
uh-huh.
where they are specifically needed to help make the reform of policing and parole and bail and sentencing.
That's right. Because I think, this, um, I think a lot of people think defunding, we got to take money away from the police. We got to get rid of the police. No. First of all, I believe that defunding is the wrong term. We need to shift the money, number one, but we need to add more money because we need to hire the best and brightest people that we can find because they're the ones that are in the community, but not only the police. We also have to have other people that deal with nonviolent situations, like maybe someone who's having some drug, he's ODing on drugs, or there's something else going on where you really don't need the police, but you need psychologists, social workers involved. They're not unarmed. In my book, I mentioned, I think it was somewhere in California where they tried this. It was a um, uh, an unarmed unit that was, they would go
Mhm,
around in a van and it was marked what they were, their purpose. It was to come in with like maybe domestic cases where there's domestic violence or whatever, where you need someone in there, a psychologist, psychiatrists, social workers, not the police coming in, guns, blaring, and, we don't want, that's not what we need. So we
right.
need this special unit to work in conjunction with the police. But the police also has to be specially trained to know. So in other words, the police that are put into a certain neighborhood, they will be trained as to what is going on in that neighborhood, the people who live there, the businesses that are there, and the problems that they have. And you should have those what do you call those town hall meetings
Yes.
all the time. Town hall meetings should be had at least once a month, meeting with the residents, the business owners, and the police are involved, and social workers are involved, psychologists. And when you have drug treatment programs in these neighborhoods, because if you get rid of, and this is something in that has to do with the sentencing reform and prison reform,
Mhm,
get rid of drug crimes, whether it's possession or distribution. Drug drug crimes, taking drugs, it's not a crime. It's a disease. And it should be treated that way. So if you take all those people out of prison that are in there, and before we used to have these mandatory minimums of
mhm.
10
Yeah.
years for in first offense, second offense, and third offense, and they would get higher just because he sold drugs. Most of the people that sell drugs are trying to make money just to support their own habit. So they have a disease, they have an illness that has to be treated. So when you think about taking all those people out of prison, look how, and housing all those prisoners, that loosens up money to put these treatment programs into the prisons and also into the communities, also into the schools. Improve the schools in those communities. They should be programs in the schools after school hours where they have special subjects, whether it's reading, English, math, science, to help those students that are falling below. And they should be workshops there after school. And the
Mhm.
teachers should be there working with the students to help them get onto grade level and even beyond that. And that's where we're missing out. And you got to, that's where the interdependency, you see, if the police it's specially trained to deal with the people that are in the neighborhoods and help the kids stay away from crime and get them involved in good, healthy activities, have the schools involved. And then when someone gets arrested, then we go, oh, the bail system. Here we have the bail system where people can't afford the bail, so they languish in prison until they have to go to trial. And so that affects, they're taken away from their home. If they have a job, they lose their job, taken away from their family and their children, and there's financial problems. So what should be done with the bail is that there should be a bail program. So these people, okay, let's find out what, if you have a drug problem, let's get you into drug rehab, into your community, and get you counseling that you may need to deal with some of the problems that you're having. Get them started into some vocational training. So there's hope for these people. They go into bail, they can't afford their bail. Where is their hope to be better people? And then that goes into the sentencing. And I here's another radical thing. Get rid of life sentences. Why do we have to have these life sentences? I have guys in prison that have already served 30 years, and they're already now well into their 50s and early 60s. There's a change in their maturity level. And when it came to all the juvenile cases that just came up several years ago, to talk about the development of maturity from 15 to 25, and they're even talking about early 20s, they're not mature enough. So why are you giving life sentences without parole to a juvenile? Matter of fact, you shouldn't even give life sentences, and you should give no life sentences to anybody. Sentences should be indeterminate. But if you read my book, it explains why. Because when they get sentenced, they're going to have all kinds of programs in the prisons, whether it's, drug treatment programs, alcohol treatment programs. You're loosening up all the money because you're reducing the sentences. So they're not staying in prison for the rest of their lives. It costs a lot of money to house one prisoner for 1 year, much less the rest of their lives. Then you've got old people in there now. Prisons are going to become nursing homes. So if you institute programs in the prisons where the judges, when they sentence the offender, they put them in the program, and the offender may even have some input as to what program they want to be in, whether it's an educational program. If they've already finished high school, well, yeah, I would like to go on to college. Well, today there's so many required courses that have to be taken. They should have those in the prisons. And then after but it's not only just that, drug treatment, alcohol treatment. Drug treatment should be maybe the 12-step program, which takes at least a year to get through. Then you've got all the different vocational skills, whether it's plumber, electrician, anything like that, carpenter.
So let me and this is great conversation and great information. A lot of people would probably agree with you, with except of that maybe 10 to 20% of people that we know just don't want to be reformed. So what will we do for those
Okay,
individuals?
now this I know. I had one inmate. He's still up there in Cumberland. He's probably been in prison, I'm thinking now, probably going on 27 years, but give or take a year or so. He was when he was arrested and convicted, he was in his early 20s, considered notorious. So he was put in the federal penitentiary, because the federal penitentiary, the Maryland prisoners have contracts with federal penitentiaries to house Maryland prisoners there. And he was housed there, and in the federal penitentiary system, an attorney could email. We could email our clients, which was wonderful. So many times he told me that most of the guys in there just made bad decisions in their lives, got involved with the wrong people, just went down the wrong road. However, there are some that are pure evil. And he said, I try to avoid them as best I can, but sometimes it's hard. It's hard.
Mhm.
There are the evil ones that cannot be reformed. And those are the ones that need to stay in prison for a life sentence. But they should not be taken out of these programs. Let them go through
Okay.
the programs. Let's see what happens if there is a chance 25 years, 30 years down the road, because this is what I say. Most of the people that get arrested for crimes, whether it's armed robbery, it's usually people in their 20s, early 30s. You don't see too many people in their 60s getting arrested. It changes. So give the person, let's see what happens. He has to serve a life sentence, but also give him the opportunity to see if he doesn't make those changes, that maybe he can be reformed. But if he can't, he has a life sentence. So you do have to consider those people, and we have to get away from, now this is prison reform, get
Mhm.
away from of punishment and more on the notion of reform and assistance and
Okay.
supporting. Because the juvenile justice system, the way that works is they want to keep the juveniles out of the criminal justice system. They don't
Right.
want them to become career criminals. So there's always programs that they put them in. Well, why can't we do that for the adults? You can say, well, they're already mature. Oh, come on. You're mature at 25? I know I was. I know I wasn't. What I know now, if I knew back then what I know now, I'd be hell on wheels. It's just the way human development goes.
Mhm.
But there should be that getting away from that notion of punishment, because when you put a person in prison, the
Mhm.
punishment is already there. He's taken away from his family, taken away from his friends, taken away from his home. If he has a job, he's taken away from his job and he's put in prison. And there's the punishment right there. But unfortunately, these prisoners keep getting punished because no one talks about how badly a lot of these inmates are treated by the prison authority. I've heard stories from inmates that made me cry. These inmates are human. They're not animals. They should not be treated as animals. They need to be treated with respect, with dignity. They need to be helped and assisted to become better people. And that's where the prison system and the criminal justice system is lacking.
Mhm.
They treat these people as second class citizens. They're no good. No, get to know some of these people. They can be helped, and most of them can be helped. And when you reform the system but put the programs in there that's going to help them, then when they get out on parole, they're already reformed. So then parole helps with the reacclimation into society and helps them with things like, well, how do I get my credit up? How do I find a place to live? Do I rent? Can I buy a home? What about a job? What about,
Mhm.
continued skill training? Because that is done in prison. Training, like if a person wants to become a plumber, he'll be trained as a plumber. He'll go through the procedure, through I guess, the training program to become a full-fledged plumber. But that doesn't happen until he goes through counseling, drug, alcohol rehab if he needs it. It takes a long time to get through all of this. That's why I say it's the sentence should not be a life sentence. It should be just indeterminate. Let's see what they do. And they're constantly supervised. They're going to school, they're going to training, they're going to counseling. They're getting their medical issues addressed and
Mhm.
taken care of. So
Mhm.
they're busy all day long. They should be busy all day long. And meanwhile, they're being continuously monitored and evaluated. And if they fail a certain section of their program, they have to repeat it. So you
Okay.
know how long it's going to take for a person to get through all these programs, but they have to be uh, evaluated all the time. And then when it comes time to, oh, they finished their program, and they have to successfully complete these at a high level. It's almost like college. It's not enough to get a C. You got to get A's.
Uh,
There has to be a certain standard of excellence that an inmate has to achieve before he's released.
move.
And then parole has to decide, well, let's see where he's, what he's done. Let's see how he's succeeded in all his programs. And then parole has to be reformed too, which is a sorry state of affairs. There's no transparency in there. They have evaluations done on the inmate, and he doesn't get to see it. It's not shared with the inmate and not shared with the attorney. And even if he has the attorney cannot participate in the parole hearing. He's just an observer. The parole hearing is just as important as trial. So it should be made that way. So an inmate has the right to have an attorney with him, and the attorney should have the right to cross-examine and have expert testimony. It should be open and transparent, and should be just like a trial. It should be quick. It shouldn't, some of these parole steps in parole can take months and years before they finish. And it's insane. So read my book. It's, and it doesn't take rocket science, to, I guess with me, I've seen all these things, and it's just my opinion and
mhm.
how I feel it should be reformed. But they just talk about police reform. They don't talk about all the other parts of the criminal justice system that needs reform, and they have to be reformed together. So as the offender works through the program,
Mhm.
it goes from one to another, one part to another, and it's consistent. And it's always about assistance and reformation and support.
Wow. Yes, indeed. So this book is actually out today.
Yay.
Yay! And where you love to buy your reading materials, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, I even saw Target was promoting it. So you can get it online. If they don't have it in the store, they will order it for you. It is out today. I know this is your baby. This has been your life's passion, and we've had many conversations on this. For anybody that is interested in having you speak on criminal reform, how can they get a hold of you?
Oh, well, they can get a hold of me through my email, which is mdc at fiorentinolawfirm.com. And Fiorentino is F as in Frank, Iorentino. And I have that, I think, at the back of my book, or is it the front? No, about the author. And
Yes, with the
at
back.
the book, and it's there. And you can reach me by email, and then I'll be more than happy to talk with you over the phone.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let me see if make sure I put it up here so people can see it. MDC.
At fiorentinolawfirm.com. Now, of course,
Yes.
my law firm isn't open. That I've retired, but but believe it or not, I'm still helping some clients, and you know, and I have several that still call me. One calls me once a month. The one that was released by Governor Hogan, he calls me once a month to make sure I'm okay. I helped him get out. Actually, we were. I did his post conviction, and if I recall, and then I found out that his case was before Governor Hogan for Governor Hogan to approve parole, and he approved it, and so it was great. But he served 30 years in prison. It's a long.
Wow. And that's definitely another conversation that I'm definitely interested in to have you back to actually talk about how the parole commission really works, because I'm not familiar or have enough information on that to see why would we involve the governors in that, or should we continue
Well,
to involve the governors in that.
Well, I think what happened when it was Governor Glendenning that did it. And now he says that was a big mistake on his part because what it is, it becomes political. You have all these um, uh, groups that want to keep people in prison because they're afraid, or if they get out, they're going to start committing crimes. Well, yeah, because the criminal justice system doesn't work. If you reform it, I'm not saying the way I said in my book,
Hmm.
but reform it in such a way that it reforms the person into a better person that he wants to succeed in life, and he has the wherewithal to do it, because most people that are in prison don't have the wherewithal. Some of them haven't even finished high school, and the ones that have, they have no skill. So what kind of job can you get? And so you sell drugs. you know but it becomes a terrible way to live life, and I'm sure that's not how people really want to live their life, and they want
Hmm.
to feel good about themselves and what they do. So get my book and read it. I'm not saying I'm an expert on this, but I think we need more compassion for the offender, and we don't have that. And I think maybe one of the reasons why, or maybe one of the reasons why people may not agree with certain things that I've said, like no life sentences, no drug crimes, they're scared. There's fear. Well, you're going to let these people out, and they're going to come in my neighborhood and they're going to commit crimes. Well, not if you reform the criminal justice system to reform the person, so they're not going to want to commit crimes. They're going to have something, because here I was raised in a middle class neighborhood. My father did well. My father and mother were Italian immigrants, and I wanted to go to college. And all my friends went to college. I went to private schools, Catholic schools, but I had that opportunity, and I remember my parents, my high school tuition was $700 a year. Well, I wish it was still $700. Now
What
it's
is it, like 25, 30,
yeah,
$40,000 for private school? That's not college.
that's not. So you use that money, then what do they do? Where are you going to have the money for college? But I had those opportunities, and the opportunity to go to college, and I'm surrounded by that. I'm surrounded by people that want to have careers and make something of their lives. But the people that come from these high crime rate neighborhoods, they don't have that. And it's so sad. And I can't understand when people say, oh, well, they can get out of that neighborhood, they can go. Oh, come on. Can they really? I mean, you really have to be a kind of person that's headstrong and tunnel vision. I'm getting out of this neighborhood, but there's no support for them. There's no,
Mhm.
and the schools in those neighborhoods aren't the greatest either. So they don't, really stress education and learning, and let the kids really want to learn. And that needs to change too. We
Mhm.
have to have better schools in those
Yeah,
neighborhoods.
yeah. It used to be. I know when I was in my early teens, late teens, we had a village of individuals around us. It started from within the family to within our neighborhood and branched out from there. So I could remember, because my parents were divorced. But I could remember living in Texas. There was my mom, there was my grandparents, there were my aunts and uncles. My uncle worked at the high school, so he saw me every day. So it wasn't like I could get away with stuff. And
Yeah,
then when I went to go live with my father, he was so well connected in the community that everybody knew who I was. So it was like if I went somewhere, he was like, "You never know who I know." So I'm just telling you beforehand. So even then, it was, started again, neighborhood, the neighbors, and it was a two-way partnership. His neighbors didn't have kids, but my dad worked nights, but the neighbors always looked out.
that's
If
right.
if we were, where are you going?
Yeah, well, who said
Yeah.
it takes a village? Was it Hillary Clinton?
Yes. And
Hillary,
then it's an old African proverb as well. It takes a
it
village.
takes a village, and that's what it is. Not only the people that live in the neighborhood, but just if you read my book on community reform and how the police can play a role in those
Yes.
communities, you know, that it becomes a village. The police, so the kids, when they're walking down the street, they see a police officer, they already know him by name, and oh, we're going to play baseball. There's a big baseball game tonight.
Right.
And the police are involved. The counselors and drug counselors are involved with all of that.
Mhm.
There's
Mhm.
drug rehab programs in
Mhm.
the schools because kids are taking drugs at an early age. Why? Because it's all around them. It's all they know. They need to be they need to experience a better way of life, and we need to bring that into those neighborhoods. And it's going to take a village. Everything. It's going to take everyone that's in that community to lift it up. Get the police involved, get social workers, psychologists, the schools, the churches, everyone involved to lift up.
Diligent. Yes.
That's to lift up that community. And so good things come out of that community, not bad things. And that's what I'd like to see. And so it's, to me, it's common sense and compassion for our fellow man. And it's lacking today. It's lacking today in our government. It's lacking everywhere, and it's just a sad, sad thing. But I hope people get my little book, and it's very easy reading. I didn't do, it's not a treatise, it's not a big research project that I did. It just comes from all my years of experience and studying, and seeing what I see in the prisons and what I hear from my clients and from their families, and also from nonprofit organizations that I've been involved with. And and that's where all this came from. And then my own thoughts, well, how can this be reformed? And be reformed in such a way that the product is a good, positive product, not a negative one. Because if you keep punishing and punishing, what product do you get in the end? Someone who's rebellious. I mean, what happens to a
Exactly.
child? Punish a child and you don't give them that love and the support and the respect that they need. Yes,
They turn the noise. You're right. They
you
they
do
turn the
need,
noise off. Mhm.
that's right, you do need discipline, but there's
Mhm.
discipline and punishment. I've heard stories where um, an inmate wasn't feeling well. He went to the infirmary in the prison. This was, I think, in the federal penitentiary, and he was turned away, and he came back in his cell and he cried. Oh my God. We put these people in prison, and then we're not going to take care of them, not only medically but psychologically. There's so much mental illness. Why are we treating these people like animals? It makes me cry. It shouldn't be that way. But this is what it's: common sense and compassion.
Well, Maria, I appreciate you coming on this morning. We have had an enlightened conversation. Your book definitely starts the conversation, which is what you wanted.
Yes.
Again, the name of the book is Interdependency: How to Reform the Criminal Justice System, a View from a Criminal Defense Attorney. Maria Fiorentino, thank you for being my guest this morning on Unapologetic Features. And just a public service announcement. For those of you that can join me tomorrow, I'm going to have Sandra Kersey Stockton on. She's going to talk about generational history and her ministry and love of foster care. You don't want to miss that conversation. She and her husband have foster cared over 100 children in our Maryland area. Wonderful woman, has a wonderful story to tell. I'm going to have you back on my show, Maria. We've
Okay.
got a lot more to discuss about this, and hopefully, this starts the conversation, which is what you wanted. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Lisa Harwell, and this is Journeys with Jones Harwell. See you next time.
Thanks. Bye.